The audience wants to see Bob.
Hello.
It's funny seeing you here.
Funny seeing you here, brother. I have heard that you squatted 800 pounds.
I did.
So, what do you think? Obviously, we mention pretty often on the channel that you're a fast squatter, not necessarily really grindy like some guys.
Yep.
Nobody believes you.
Yep.
Everybody thinks you train like a complete bitch at sub 6 and are just a genetic freak on Instagram.
It's always funny when
Everybody's always telling you what your RPE is.
you're at 400 kilos. I was like, I think I want to fit.
Oh, you think? So obviously, you're a fast squatter.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you are good for right now? Just on today.
Today,
No
okay.
more training, no full deload.
Yeah, I think there's like, you kind of have to think about it as like, or I think about it as like almost like a percent that I get it.
Yeah.
Where it's like, up to a certain weight, it's kind of 100%. And then as you progress
Yep.
past that, I would need to do like a better job executing.
Yep.
And so it's like to have like a reasonable percent, I think I could do like 8-10 right now and have that not be a bad call.
Yeah, 8-10. I think 8-10 would be a good percentage lift. 8-15, 8-20 would start being
That's where you start
into,
getting, like, I need to-
50-50 like reps. Where
Yeah,
it's
like if I
you're
execute
out
it-
of the groove just a little bit.
Yeah,
It
if
always
I-
cracks me up when people on Instagram are just like, "You're wrong, dude. That's a 7."
Yeah.
And it's like, my brother, I have watched him fail reps.
Yeah.
And it's not like we didn't go through a period when we were younger of failing a lot of reps.
It's especially
I know when you're gonna fail.
It's especially funny because like I did that 793 2 blocks ago, and I got a million. Like you could do 7 reds right
Yeah.
now, and then I went and I tried 800 the next block. You know, put a 10 weeks of training in and then failed.
Yes.
And I think that was a misgroove of some kind, where it's
Yeah.
like that's the percent thing. But like both you and I talked about like that was a weight that I shouldn't have had like a meaningful percentage of missing.
Yes.
Like that
it
was
should
like,
have been a misgroove and still get.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my second question. What do you attribute this PR to? Obviously, just more time, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a rough amount of work that you need to do to get better. We just spent more work in that range, like more time in that range.
Mm-hmm.
But what in particular did you focus on to lead to this PR this block?
I would say kind of 3 things came together to make this a lot more successful than last block.
Okay.
Because, you know, I don't think last block, the one that I failed 800, was like a complete like waste of a block. You often say like,
Hard work is seldom wasted.
yeah, where it's, I don't think that was like nothing, and I don't think I could have done this as comfortably as I did this block if I
Without
had,
last block.
Yeah, if I had skipped that.
Yeah, it's always a shame when I see younger lifters get discouraged. It's like you might have absolutely fumbled the expression phase, but it's not like you didn't get stronger.
Yeah.
You only didn't get stronger if you get so discouraged by the miss that you then undertrain and regress. If you keep motivated, you can build on that, and the next block might be a 20-pound PR because of what you did this block. So it's like, don't be discouraged by a fumble at the last minute. If you felt like the first 7 weeks of that block were cash, A, it's a good idea to do it again
Yeah.
and adjust your last 3 weeks. But B, you did something. You got stronger. Don't get discouraged and let that backslide.
Yeah, I've kind of been running that on my deadlift, where I'm putting good work in, and I'm not like, I would keep like unsuccessfully peaking. So it's like, one, there's obviously something to address in peaking, and I think we have a pretty good idea of that. But also it's like, I think I've put, I don't know, probably 16 plus weeks of really solid training in since I hit my last deadlift PR.
Yep.
And I think that is laying a very good base
Yep.
for when we do solve my like durability peaking problems, that I'm gonna be able to have a lot of momentum going into that,
Yeah.
where we can take like multiple chip blocks in a row. And then on the squat, so what did I say for the first one?
Having done a prior training cycle.
Oh, yeah. So, one, belt squats, huge. I love belt squats. I think our last block, the one that I failed, we were doing lunges as my primary.
Yep.
And I think that was beneficial, and we did get use out of it for multiple blocks, just doing something unilateral. But I think the issue was that it wasn't heavy enough to be like an actively driving stimulus for my squat.
Yep.
And so it was like, it was beneficial as a unilateral one. And I think if I did something else and then that, it would have been way better.
Yeah.
But it was just like, I was not good at them enough to have that being a primary drive.
So the inclusion of very difficult belt squat sets.
That was huge, yep.
Yep.
2, I think last block I didn't peak my variables enough.
Oh, for the folks at home,
Yeah.
lots of people don't have a belt squat.
Uh-huh.
What would you do if you were at a different gym?
Leg press. Leg press is awesome. We did leg press for a year. And
What if their
was
leg
like-
press is like a shallow one, right? Where it's like they're very, very forward lean, so they can't get as big of a stretch.
I mean, I do it with a super wide stance. You can also put pads behind your back. You could also, like, if you're not a super advanced lifter, you can just do pause squats after. Or like high bar. I think there's oftentimes the idea of like the secondary motion. I mean, you could just do a one that's like
More squats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just do more squats. Like if we were like, hey Max, you're left in a gym with a barbell. It's not like I'm hopeless to progress.
Yeah.
It's like we can just do a different squat variation. If my quads are weak, we'll just do high bar. If we think our hips are weak, maybe slightly wider stance. Pause squats. So it's like I could just do a secondary one depending on what leg machines I have access to.
Yep.
So one, I think switching to belt squats was huge.
Yep.
Two, I think I just like didn't like my like training variables with like my sleep and my nutrition were good, but they weren't great.
Yeah.
And at the loads I'm currently at, I need to be on with literally everything
Yeah.
up to peaking with that. And I was a little too chillaxed with like hanging with my girlfriend and staying up maybe slightly too late, or like missing a meal the day before a big lift, and like that's just unacceptable at
Yeah.
the level I'm at. So like I have slept 9+ hours every night for the last 3 weeks. I've not missed a single meal. I've not missed any of my like. I eat like yogurt and berries. I've made sure I have that every single. I think that's huge. To be
How
honest.
much caffeine have you had?
300 milligrams.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest. I was like, I don't have a big deadlift, so sleep doesn't matter.
Geek, dude.
A rain literally will keep me up till like 3 a.m. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna sleep tonight.
Yeah.
I've got a big plans on playing Minecraft.
All right, what's the third one?
Technique.
'Kay.
I think we had like a lot of good notes.
I have a later question about that, so we can get into
okay.
that in a second. But yeah, okay.
I talking
Next.
crazy fast.
Did you? You're rattling off answers. Now the people will love it.
Okay.
Next one. Did you feel like the early training cycle Good Mornings had anything to do with the PR, or were they inherently too limited by the amount of specific work you have to do and deadlift training to where it was like low back training economy when we are in a specific phase like this is kind of already so limited we weren't able to push them hard enough?
I think like they were mildly productive, and I think some of the benefit is setting me up to do more next block. Like I think sometimes it's like if your accessory doesn't help the first block you do it, especially as I've gotten more advanced, I think immediately dropping that is often a mistake.
Yeah.
Where it's like I think going into this next one, I'm gonna be able to do more good morning volume.
Yeah.
Because we have had the issue of my like low back tolerance / volume has been disturbingly low.
Yes.
And it's like both of us have identified good mornings would be awesome for my squat. Like
Yeah.
it addresses a huge problem in it, but it's also like how much are we gonna do those over something that's helping my deadlift, which has been the more of a problem one.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna put all of my eggs into that basket. So I think moderately successful. I think just doing, there's an old Pete Rubish quote, which is like doing something is usually better than doing nothing, which obviously you can do too much.
Yeah.
But in that regard, I think just that like small little bit, who knows, maybe I like would have tweaked something if I wasn't putting that like little bit of extra like posterior chain work on that my squat day, even if it wasn't super
Yeah.
high
so,
percentage.
Oftentimes, one mistake you'll make, right, is being a little bit overly extended in terms of like your mid back positioning.
Yeah.
Right, not clamping into your brace, right, because you're always trying to find a balance between squeezing the upper back really hard, which kind of pulls you towards extension, and crunching the abs, which pulls you towards flexion. I always have the analogy of like you got a tower with the guide wires on both sides. You want both sides taut, and that creates the most stability.
Yeah.
You don't never want to loosen one of those wires. Really, you don't say stop flexing your back so hard. You say flex your abs harder.
Yeah.
Or you say don't say stop flexing your abs so hard. Flex your back harder. Do you think that the additional core work we did this block helped with that, or was more just a good secondary habit to just invest in like your overall physicality? Do you think that had any impact on your technique in that regard?
I think so. I don't know if it's like my abs were suddenly like notably stronger, where it's like strength to allow you to keep position. I do think actively training something helps me have a better mind muscle connection with it.
Yeah.
Where it's like I don't think my abs were like suddenly way stronger.
Yeah, I don't think that's just you though. When you're doing like direct isolated movement,
Yeah.
you can kind of find that muscle, especially if it kind of mirrors the function, like your sit-ups, kind of mirror the function we're looking for you to pull into in the squat.
Yeah, where it's the opposite of me, my arch,
Yeah.
over arch squat. It's like I want to still keep my back as tight as possible, but it's kind of crunching down against that. And so it's like, I think the benefit there was oftentimes if I'm like in a hypertrophy phase or my squat technique isn't like super locked in, it feels like I'm just bracing and it's just like vague internal pressure and I have no real mind muscle connection to my core. And I think the major benefits of those are that I'm like getting a better feel for that, and that
Yeah.
allowed me to have a more consistent brace through the block.
Yeah, it's similar to our pull downs for bench, right?
Yeah.
It's like getting a bigger back really going to drive your bench up that much? probably not if it's already reasonably sized, but including those weekly improves the mind muscle connection with kind of the scapular retraction and depression.
Yeah.
So it kind of carries over to technique more than anything, right? So on that note, what were your biggest focuses technically this training cycle, and kind of why? You can explain to people why you aren't thinking about other things. Why are you thinking about those things?
Yeah, so we talked about in a large lads episode that like as you get more advanced as a lifter, your cues become a little bit more like
Whimsical.
Yeah.
Whimsical makes it sound cool. Abstract.
Yeah,
Feel like internal feelings, especially if you're not coaching people regularly. You haven't even attempted to how to vocalize it because no one's asked, right? And it's like you think, right?
Yeah.
So it's like someone will ask you, "What are you cueing?" You're like, "Well, hold on, let me check and get back to you."
Yeah.
Right? What were your big areas of focus?
Okay, so I'm gonna throw out my like goofy cue and then what I think that was actually trying to do.
Okay.
It is the one I get made fun of the most by you and people at our gym. It's push through my feet.
Yep.
Which, of course, of course. Really advanced level cues, push through your feet. But I think I've always had a problem with like active foot activation,
Yep.
where if a lot of people have commented on my Instagram that it looks like I'm falling on the outside of my feet, and I think that was like creating lateral tension, but it being uneven is not optimal. It's
Yeah.
better than when I was caving super hard,
Yeah.
but it's going too far in the other direction.
Yeah,
And
so just really quick, if you haven't seen it, Max used to sit really, really hard on the lateral edge of his foot. And that was how he would kind of create stability at his hip, right? And as he would come down, by his bottommost position, he would have full foot pressure. So it was like standing at the top, all outer foot.
Yeah.
At the bottom, it would be full foot, like inner and outer together. Really nice position, cool, boom, pow. And we've always been like, that is silly. We should have full foot pressure
Yeah.
the whole time.
And that's still a work in progress. There is still, like, you can see that I don't have completely even foot pressure at the top, but I think turning my toes out slightly during,
I think it helped a ton.
that helped a lot in terms of like when I was wedging my toes really far forward, I had the crazy lateral pressure, and I think having my toes turned more out led to that being more even. But push through my feet is basically just like pushing through like the entirety of my foot and not just my heels or my toes,
Yeah.
because I have a tendency to go one or the other. The other one is really focusing on like hinging into the hole, because if I think about like where I'm like the weight is on my foot, like if I think about my heel, it feels like I'm kind of disconnected from my like hip / pelvis, and I think that's part of the reason I failed my 800-pound squat, was that I knew that like, hey, when I'm more parallel to the ground, not super parallel to the ground ever,
Yeah.
but when I'm more, I usually have a better squat.
Yep.
And it's like that was more correlational than like cause,
Yeah.
because I ended up getting like kind of folded, and I was all of my weight were on my heels, and I had like no ability to really drive, so I kind of bounced out of the hole and then came right back down because I didn't have even foot pressure, and I essentially just like folded onto myself, came out of the hole, had no success. And
So is it safe to say that, right, like foot pressure, big part of it,
Yep.
right? But a squat is a balancing act between loading your knee and your hip
yeah,
in a unique ratio to you. You have your ratio, other people have their ratio. If you're Sir Dave, that ratio is like 90% hip, 10% knee. If you are someone who squats wicked upright, Andrew Kyle Tang, it's like 90% knee,
Yeah.
maybe loads the hip a little bit, right? You've struggled to find that loading balance, so a lot of what you were doing with your lower body, attacking that from the foot, but also the hip, right? Hinging slightly more like stomach to thigh
Yeah.
than what you had done kind of when defaulting to what you wanted to do. What were you focused on in the upper body?
okay, so I got two more.
Okay, let's go.
One, mostly just like I need to do a really good job of my bracing my core down, but that's like if you're going through your squat in like steps, of like approaching the bar, going through that I think can sometimes be helpful, and think about it like a sequential series of cues. It is thinking about like almost arching my T-spine into the bar,
Yep.
and then bracing,
And then clamp.
and then unracking with the bar coming out last, where I think a lot of the issue was that I was either doing a really good job on my upper back or a good job on my core, not either or.
Well, I think that ordering is huge, rather than like in the past you've tried to squeeze your back and lock your brace at the same time.
Yeah.
And one or the other happens. And that's one of the things I look for giving you feedback when you're warming up, right? Is like, let's see you squeeze your back all the way, right? Really tighten together, like squeeze everything in towards that center line. Then the hips come back under. then I want to say like, hey, keep that, then lock the like rectus abdominis in, right? And then the last one, right, is we want you to the bar to be the last thing that comes out of the rack. Like your head comes up, everything comes up, and the bar comes up last, right? Rather than what most people do, the bar comes up first because they shrug into it. Just something we look for. We want to settle the weight really low, and that's been probably a very long time cue, is that bar coming out of the rack last.
Yeah, I think if I was thinking about like I'm doing a heavy triple, my back tightness starts out at whatever it starts at, and it kind of only declines.
Yep.
And so it's like the two major important parts are getting as tight as possible and doing the best possible job maintaining. Whereas my core, it's like I could do a bad job bracing my core 1 rep and then do a way better job the second one. And so it's like the core needs to be set first, and the back needs to be set first, and the core comes after that. In terms of cueing. And then the other one is the tempo of my squat.
Yep.
As I've gotten to heavier weights, and even with kilos, even on a fresh Ohio Power Bar, there's just bar whip.
Yep.
I could do a better job settling it, and taking my walkout slow, and then slowing down my descent has been huge.
Yep.
Because one of the big, one of the things that felt the worst last block is that it felt like I didn't have great control in the early weeks. Where
Yep.
it's like if I don't have awesome control with 565, 755 is going to feel like it's literally going to kill me.
Yeah.
And so it's like, let's say I take one less rep because I'm not bouncing as hard on the early reps. That is a way, way, way beneficial sacrifice
Yep.
to like slow down and have that tempo, because it's a lot easier to speed up
Yep.
than it is to late block, try and slow
Absolutely,
down.
right. And it's like, I think a lot of people make that mistake when they do their reps in the way that lets them get the most reps early in their block.
Yeah.
Right? When it's like, I would rather you squat the way you have to squat when it's heavy. Like, it's like, you see guys dive bomb when it's 60%. It's like, I've seen your 100%, you're scared to dive bomb.
Yeah.
You should squat the way you would squat with 100%, even if that takes your weight down for your sets of 8, or it takes your reps down at 60%, or whatever it is. It will carry over better that way than building a greater number of total reps via using a technique that's different. Right? You can see the same thing with a bench press. The negative speeds up when it's like, keep the negative the same. Like, doesn't have to be a tempo, although sometimes I'll just cue that because it gets people going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, I think that like making your volume more specific, even if it's at the cost of a little load,
Yeah.
goes a long way.
And I
So, this is a little long. So
Yeah, sorry.
Final question.
Okay.
Not in general.
Okay.
Based on what you did this block to yield this result.
Uh-huh.
So specifically that. You're not just giving advice.
Okay.
You're giving advice based on this block.
Okay.
What could anybody watching this video that's interested in being a big squatter take away from what you focused on this block to make their next period of squat training go a little bit better than what it would have otherwise? So it's just kind of specific to the things you were really harping on as the mantras of this training cycle.
I think putting really hard work in on your like secondary movement is huge. Being really deliberate, focusing on the technical mistakes you made the previous block during your volume phase, because I think a lot of people, let's check the box of a 3x8.
Yep.
But it's like you need to have cues coming in of like, what did I do wrong last time? What can I do better this time? And actively focusing on those in the early block is huge. Just putting hard bone to metal work in. It's easier to find where you're working too hard in the early block and then dial that back. And then keep your variables good. I think those are 3. Really, if you know you're going for your first 500, 600, whatever pounds.
So when you say secondary squat, do you mean would you be referring to their secondary squats? Because they aren't as strong as you.
Yes,
they definitely squat a second
they're
time.
squatting multiple times a week, yeah.
Or are you referring to their leg press, or their Bulgarian split squat, or belt squat, or hack squat, or whatever they have?
Yeah, I think it's both. Looking back, because I squatted twice a week for
Nearly 10 years?
Yeah. So it's like for the majority of my training career was a two session one, and we did pause squats forever because it was just like bread and butter. It worked every single time.
Yep.
And I think, yeah, because it's like focusing on your technique and working hard on your secondary session, especially technique. I feel like people can really phone it in on a secondary squat day because it's the less important squat day. Don't leave that for granted, because it's like that's 50% of your squat work hypothetically.
Yeah.
That is huge gains to be taken advantage of. And then your secondary movement, like really make sure you're getting hard work in. I think sometimes it's like
Yeah, well, especially, like we've talked about, if you say leg press is an easy exercise, you're self-reporting on actually just being a pussy.
Yeah.
Some of the hardest sets I've ever done have been leg press because the weight is very high, the strain on the body is very high, and the technique is very low. So it's like, I don't know if I've ever hit a true 10.
was gonna say,
It's
the
like
ability
I've
to-
failed a leg press maybe once with like 1,300 for max ROM sets of 12.
Yeah.
And it's like, but I can always grit out one more, which is awesome because that's the time you can turn your head off a little bit, control your negative still, and dig really, really deep, like you love leg extensions for. It's like, maybe we shouldn't be going sicko mode brain off on our squat,
Yeah.
and we should save that for the leg press or for the belt squat, right? I think most guys could dig a lot deeper. I would rather see them do less sets, you know what I mean? If I had an athlete, and I was seeing just like a regularly mailed in 3 straight sets on the leg press, for periods of the year, I'll trade that for one set where you really give it a good go.
Yeah.
People would be like, well, sets, like number of sets, volume matters. And it's like, yeah, for periods of the year, I think you could accumulate the greater amount of total volume on those 3 sets. But a lot of the time, I would like to just see it dig just one, just do one.
Yeah.
Go all the way one time.
Yeah.
If that's easy, do it a second time, but start with the one.
Yeah.
Build with a high quality and then build up quantity rather than starting with a high quantity and then trying to build up quality like retrospectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
800 solid ass
800
pounds.
solid ass pounds.